Okay, so we're diving deep today. You guys, our awesome listeners, sent in some seriously interesting stuff, excerpts from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. And, well, we're going to try to unpack it all, right?
Yeah.
Help you guys navigate this crazy thing we call life. It's like, think of us as your shortcut to wisdom. You get the good stuff without having to read the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Just from glancing at the jacket, it seems like quite a ride. Like he's got humor, unexpected connections, even like compares skateboarding to lobsters. It's wild. But then the cool thing is it's not just random. This book is actually built on his earlier work, Maps of Meaning, which is all about, how we humans try to make sense of the world, that whole order and chaos thing.
So it's not just like life hacks. It's deeper, right? Like rooted in how our brains work.
Yeah.
And for you listening, we want this to be like that light bulb moment, that really sticks, but without like overwhelming you with info.
Right on. And right from the start, this idea of universality, it's really powerful that the text points out that, even though we're all different genes, different experiences, even how our brains are wired, we all share this one like fundamental struggle, making sense of the unknown and like trying to create order out of all the chaos. It's kind of unifying, actually.
So no matter who you are, where you are, we're all dealing with that tension, the known versus like what we don't expect.
It is, yeah. And building on that, the book then goes into this critique of moral relativism, like this idea that right and wrong, they're just, opinions or cultural things. And the author's point is that's kind of left a whole generation without, well, what used to be called practical wisdom.
Hold on. So you mean like there's no absolute right or wrong, just different perspectives of the book saying that's a problem?
Yeah, that's the heart of it. Peterson suggests it's like we've devalued virtue, and now a lot of adults, they're hesitant to, actually guide young people on how to live a good life. Like we've lost some of those time-tested lessons.
Makes you think, right? If everything's relative, what guides our choices? And how do we even judge, like, what a good society looks like?
It's a big question for sure. Like, have we unintentionally, by throwing out this wisdom of the ages, have we made it harder for the next generation to figure things out, morally, even intellectually?
Now, you mentioned chaos and order. The excerpts, they lay that out pretty specifically, don't they?
They do. So order is like, think of all those social norms, those patterns we're used to where things are mostly predictable, people cooperate. And it's interesting. The author links it symbolically to the masculine, like the wise king providing structure, but also, the tyrant, too much order gets oppressive.
In chaos, that's like the opposite, right? The stuff that throws us off, the unexpected.
Exactly. From, a joke that bombs to like losing your job, those disruptions. And symbolically, it's linked to the feminine, like the source of creation, new possibilities, but also when things fall apart, the force of destruction. So it's this constant back and forth between those two, shaping our experience. It's like we tend to think of chaos as bad, but the book suggests, maybe avoiding it totally, that can make us stagnant. Think of a company that never takes risks, right? Stable for a while, then poof, irrelevant. That interplay, stepping into the unknown even a little bit, it seems crucial for growth, not just survival.
So it's like constantly finding balance.
Yeah.
Between what's familiar and what's going to shake things up. That resonates.
And get this, he's saying we didn't just evolve to survive in the physical world. Like our brains are adapted to this whole order, chaos, meta-reality almost. Yeah. It's like yin and yang, Meaning comes when we find that sweet spot between the two.
Speaking of meaning, shared belief systems, the book says those are essential. Why is that?
Right. So Peterson says shared beliefs, they're the foundation for how we predict each other's behavior. If we kind of agree on how to act, what to expect, cooperation becomes not only possible, but like way more efficient. And these systems, it's not just in our heads. He says they're both internal, what we believe, A&D external, how we act based on that, like a social contract we're mostly all following.
So that common ground, it's what keeps us from like constantly bumping into each other socially.
Exactly. And the text, it emphasizes how high the stakes are if that shared understanding gets messed up. Because think about it, these beliefs simplify a crazy complex world. When that starts crumbling, society can become really unstable, really fast.
There's this vivid dream in the excerpts about being inside a cathedral. What's the significance of that?
Ah, yes, that dream. So he's under the dome, right at the center of the cross. Symbolically, that's heavy stuff, suffering, death, transformation. The author sees it as representing the line between order and chaos. And the dreamer, at first he wants to run, but then he's drawn back. Like, we can't avoid confronting those big, scary parts of life.
It's personal, but also like a universal feeling. We all avoid stuff we know we should probably face.
For sure. And this leads into the idea of meaning being found at the border, that in-between zone where the safe, known world meets the potential of the unknown. When we're actively balancing those, engaging with both, that's when things get meaningful, intense, like time stops almost.
Like that flow state, right, when you're so absorbed in something.
Exactly. And he suggests something really profound, that if we live authentically in that balanced way, that might be what lets us accept our self-awareness and that, well, we're going to die. And we can accept those things without bitterness or needing like a rigid, absolute certainty about everything.
Yeah, this one's out there, the lobster analogy. What's that got to do with dominance hierarchies?
It's about the deep, deep history of these hierarchies. Lobsters, they've been around for, get this, over 350 million years. And these hierarchies, they've been a constant in their environment. Even with their simple nervous systems, they've got the neurochemistry to process their social standing. Like, imagine a traffic light for their social interactions. Certain chemical signals tell them, stop, you're outranked, or go ahead, you're in charge. Humans, obviously way more complex, but the idea that our biology is wired to respond to social status, well, it's ancient.
So not just us, not even just mammals, this goes way back.
Way back. Peterson argues it predates like capitalism, communism, the patriarchy, all of it. It's a near eternal aspect of life that we've adapted to. Culture itself, he suggests, is a natural outgrowth of this whole dominance hierarchy thing.
And being low on the totem pole, lobster or human, what does that mean?
It's not pretty. The book is blunt. Low status, regardless of gender, often means worse living conditions, not enough food, worse health, physically and mentally. Harder to find partners, age faster, more likely to get taken advantage of. Even if you've got some money, if you don't know how to use it right or lack the social skills, well, you're a target.
Sounds precarious, to say the least.
It is. And the book points out how these negative situations can create vicious cycles. Like depression leads to isolating yourself, which makes you feel more lonely and worthless, which makes you isolate more, and so on.
And trauma. That plays a big part in these cycles too, right?
Huge part. He suggests trauma can damage your internal dominance counter, makes you more vulnerable to getting hurt again. You might start acting defensively, which unintentionally signals weakness to others, and bam, you're more likely to be targeted.
Which is where assertiveness comes in. Even, he calls it righteous anger. That can be a necessary response.
Yeah. It can. The author says compassion without boundaries, it actually invites exploitation. Being able to stand up for yourself, to say no and mean it, being assertive when you need to be, that can actually decrease the chances of someone being aggressive towards you. You're setting healthy boundaries.
So not being aggressive all the time, but preventing others from walking all over you.
That's it. Peterson says tyranny, in all its forms, it fills a vacuum. If you don't assert yourself early on, you become a target.
He makes a striking point about how some people are shocked by their own capacity for anger. That's food for thought.
Right. He uses the example of like new soldiers with PTSD. It's not just the horrors they saw, but also realizing they're capable of violence themselves. That can be really disturbing, especially if you came from a sheltered background where that side of human nature was like hidden.
Like a part of you didn't know was there, suddenly revealed, and it's not pretty.
Exactly. And this ties into standing up metaphysically. It's more than just posture.
So good posture isn't just about looking confident.
No, it's deeper. He says it's about willingly accepting the burdens that come with life. And that shift, physically, it reflects a change in your nervous system. You go from, like, bracing for disaster to, like, facing a challenge head on. It's about seeing the potential reward, the gold, the dragon hordes, and not just being terrified of the dragon.
It's a mental shift that's actually shown in your body.
Exactly. That willingness to take on responsibility, to stand up, that's key to creating a meaningful life, he says.
This one is so strange. The paradox of transplant rejection. Why would someone sabotage a treatment that could save their life?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? You go through this huge surgery, the wait, and then you don't take the meds that make it work. The author presents it as almost impossible to grasp. It makes you think there's got to be some deep psychology at play, you know? Maybe subconsciously resisting being dependent or feeling unworthy.
Like there's some deeper force working against their own desire to live.
It's possible. It shows how complex human motivation is. What we consciously want doesn't always line up with how we actually act.
You brought up Tolkien before. The Shire, Smaug's lair, Pinocchio's journey. How do those fit into this order and chaos idea?
So the Shire, that's pure order, right? Safe, predictable, maybe a little naive. Smaug's lair, monstrous belly, total chaos, dangerous, unknown, but also transformative. The hero's journey, whether it's Frodo going into Mordor or Pinocchio saving Geppetto, it's all about going into that chaos and coming back changed. Peterson says this is how you become a real person, not just superficial, but engaged with the whole of reality.
Like facing those dark, messy parts of life, that's what lets you grow, actually become something more.
Right, and he puts our existence in this constant push and pull. Order's always bordered by chaos. Meaningful engagement with life, it happens when we learn to navigate between those two.
Then the discussion shifts gears, looks at morality, specifically how Christianity developed.
He points out, back when Christianity started, the world was way more violent. Human sacrifice, gladiators killing each other, brutal stuff. So those early moral codes, the thou shalt nots, they were largely about getting a handle on those primal urges, preventing society from tearing itself apart.
So less about deep theology, more about basic social survival.
That's how it's presented. And while we're not, throwing people to lions anymore, the book suggests those aggressive tendencies, they're still in us. But at least now we collectively realize, that's not exactly a recipe for a thriving society.
But even today, right, there's a lot of hidden struggle, quiet resilience. The book's example of everyday heroism, it really shows that.
It does. Those two disabled utility workers working together to do their job and doing it beautifully, it just shows you the strength, the mutual support that's out there all the time. Peterson says this kind of everyday heroism, people overcoming challenges, contributing, helping each other, it's way more common than we realize.
It reminds you to look deeper, appreciate that quiet strength people have.
Absolutely. And then this leads into a big one. Treating yourself with the same care you'd give someone else, especially someone vulnerable, like a child.
Okay, break that down. We all indulge sometimes, right?
He separates what you want right now versus what's truly good for you long term. You wouldn't just give a kid candy all day, right? Same for yourself. Real self-care, it's about guiding yourself towards virtue, responsibility, even when it's hard. It's about being a good parent to yourself.
Tough choices, but the ones that pay off in the end.
Exactly. And the story of Chris, the young guy, smart but angry, hopeless, it shows what happens when someone's potential gets neglected, even if outwardly they have advantages. It makes you think about what basic human needs were missed.
Seems like he was struggling inside, even with support around him.
Yeah, and he touches on the whole tune in, turn on, drop out thing. There was this desire to escape, right? But the book contrasts that initial idealism with what often happened next. The disillusionment when, the personal stuff wasn't addressed, just carried along.
So running away doesn't fix things if you haven't dealt with the root cause.
Right. And then a big question. What stops people like Chris, anyone struggling, from actually changing? He looks at limitations, health issues, past trauma. It's complicated.
A reminder that it's rarely just about willpower. There's often a lot more going on.
A lot more. And this leads into a warning about trying to help the wrong way. He uses the analogy of a bad worker on a good team. Trying to uplift someone who's super negative, it can drag the whole team down. And as he says, down is a lot easier than up.
Tough, but true. Sometimes wanting to help can backfire.
It shows how important it is to understand the situation, right? Is this person actually ready to change? Peterson even asks, do some people deep down accept their suffering because it's, easier than the uncertainty of getting better?
That's a heavy thought. But it leads into this idea of choosing your friends wisely, right?
Exactly. And he's not saying ditch anyone having a hard time. It's about recognizing that friendship, it should be reciprocal. You're not morally obligated to constantly support someone who's making the world worse. Instead, choose friends who want things to be better, who are happy when you're doing well. Surround yourself with people who build you up, not tear you down.
Creating a circle that supports everyone's growth. Love it.
And then he addresses that inner critic we all have, the one that's always negative. He's saying maybe that voice isn't as reliable as we think. Talking yourself into irrelevance, he says, is not a profound critique of being.
Man, that inner critic can be brutal, and it always feels so justified,
It can. And he's saying question it, especially if it's always finding fault.
Resentment is also something he talks about, and he actually calls it a revelatory emotion.
Yeah.
How so?
It's weird, right? But he says resentment can be a signal. Sometimes it means you're just being immature. Stop whining, take action. But other times it's a sign that something's truly wrong, that you're being treated unfairly. And in that case, he says, you've got to speak up. Silence in the face of injustice, that's dangerous.
So it's like a red flag, either internally or externally, that something needs to change.
That's it. And he warns against letting resentment turn into, like, fantasies of revenge. That's going down a dark path.
He also cautions against comparing ourselves to others. Why is that so important?
Because everyone's story is different, right? We've all got our own unique challenges, opportunities, history. Comparing without understanding the full context, it just leads to bad judgments, both about ourselves and others.
It's like judging a marathon runner at mile 1 based on like a sprinter speed. Totally different game.
Perfect analogy. And yet, despite all that uniqueness, Peterson highlights this. Humans are wired to see the present as lacking and to strive for better. That's built into us. It's not just about taking action, he says. It's fundamental to how we perceive the world. We're always oriented towards that potential better state.
So we're kind of programmed to always want progress, always be reaching.
Seems like it. But then how we see better, that's selective too. That gorilla experiment, classic example. We only see what's relevant to us right now, our goals, and miss other stuff, sometimes obvious stuff.
We block out so much just to make sense of it all.
We have to, otherwise it'd be overwhelming. But that selectivity, it can also mean we're blind to what we truly need because we're fixated on what we want. He suggests maybe our unhappiness often comes from wanting the wrong things. And to get what we truly need, we have to be willing to let go of some habits, some beliefs, even if we're attached to them.
Sacrifice again, right?
Yep.
Giving up something you value for something potentially better, even if it's not clear yet what that is.
Exactly. Letting go of those narrow ambitions that can open you up to possibilities you never even saw before. And suddenly, better takes on a whole new meaning.
Religion comes up next, but not in the usual way.
Right. He says, at its core, religion's about behavior. Striving to be good, more than just believing certain things. And discipline, that's the starting point. Can't aim for anything worthwhile if you can't even, control yourself.
So walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
That's the focus here. And in this context, the Old Testament God, he's presented as a tough but realistic parent. Those harsh stories, the punishments, they reflect, he says, a deep understanding of consequences. Ancient societies, they messed up, made bad choices, and boom, things fell apart, sometimes literally.
A kind of cosmic tough love, maybe.
Yeah, you could say that. And then he challenges the listener. Make a conscious contribution to life. Every day, ask yourself, what can I do, even a little thing, to make things better? Aiming for, the betterment of being itself, aligning with truth, with what's good.
So a daily practice of making the world a little bit better. I like that.
Me too. And he links that to Western ethics, the Sermon on the Mount. It's a positive vision, not just avoiding bad stuff, but actively aiming for good.
Now, he brings in some stats, kind of unexpectedly, like the skewed reproductive potential of men. Why is that relevant?
He's using those historical examples, Genghis Khan and such, to show how men and women, biologically, have different reproductive possibilities. It's a stark reminder of some basic biological realities that have shaped, all of human history.
Highlighting a fundamental difference in potential impact. Interesting.
It is. And then he talks about the cost of pointless conflict. He uses the example of a parent fighting with a kid, spending way too much time on it. It's about the wasted time, the resentment that builds up, all that energy that could be used for something positive.
Draining everyone involved and preventing, actual progress.
Exactly. And that leads into a warning about radical societal change as, a cure-all. He says, societies are complex systems, they evolve slowly, and trying to overhaul them based on, grand ideas, it often causes way more harm than good. The unintended consequences are massive.
Revolutions, they sound good in theory, but the reality is messy.
Totally. And to drive home the point about conflict being, deeply ingrained in us, he brings up Jane Goodall's work, Chimpanzees. Brutal warfare between groups. It's a reality check. That capacity for violence, it's older than human societies, older than our ideologies.
Sobering to think about.
It is. Then he talks about damage by omission, especially with kids. Not paying attention, not correcting them, he says, that can be just as bad as, actual abuse. Ignoring problems doesn't make them go away, and it leaves kids without the tools to deal with the world.
So inaction can be just as harmful as action when it comes to raising kids.
Absolutely. It can leave them in this, unconscious and undifferentiated state, not knowing how to develop properly.
He also talks about different types of crying in kids, which I'd never really considered before.
Right. Not all crying is sadness or fear. Anger's a big one. And anger crying in kids, it's often about trying to dominate. You got to handle that differently than a distress cry. Be firm, set boundaries. The example of the kid who keeps standing up, That's classic.
So it's about reading the situation, understanding what need that cry is communicating.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the power of gradual training. Uses the example of teaching a kid to handle plates without breaking them. Break it down into small steps, reward progress. That works for skills, but also for behavior in general.
Baby steps, achievable goals, celebrate the wins along the way. Solid advice.
It is. And even negative emotions, the ones we hate, they serve a purpose. They protect us, help us learn from mistakes, avoid danger. Like pain and anxiety, they often motivate us way more than pleasure or hope.
We learn more from screwing up than from, like, getting a pat on the back.
Yep.
And he makes the point. Punishment, in some form, it's universal. Whether it's physical or like social isolation, deprivation of liberty, it all comes down to like creating an unpleasant experience that makes you not want to do that thing again. It's how we learn.
Consequences, in one form or another, they're built into how we function as a society.
Right. And even the word no, he talks about that. It says, if there's no real consequence behind it, especially for kids learning boundaries, no means nothing. It's just air.
Gonna have some teeth behind it, otherwise it's meaningless.
Exactly. And he challenges the idea that physical discipline always equals like teaching kids to hit. It's about the how much, the when, the context. A flick on the finger is different from a beating. It's more nuanced than just saying all hitting is bad.
So understanding the subtleties, the potential effectiveness, instead of a blanket ban.
Right. And he describes like the ideal 3-year-old. Polite, engaging, but also stands their ground, not a pushover. Liked by kids and adults.
The kind of kid that just navigates social stuff easily. Exactly. And he warns, if parents don't correct bad behavior, well, the world will. And the world's punishments, they're a lot harsher.
So good parenting, discipline, it's like early prep for the real world.
It is. And this ties into taking responsibility for preparing for chaos. Like, if a hurricane's coming, you prepare, right? Some bad stuff you can't avoid. But not preparing when you should, he says, that's a failure, even a sin. It's connected to that old Jewish tradition of self-blame. When something bad happens, look at what you could have done to prevent it.
Owning your choices, good and bad.
Yes, and he gives this advice. Stop doing stuff you know is wrong, even if you don't totally get why it's wrong. We often have this inner sense of what's right, even if we can't explain it.
Trusting your gut, even when it doesn't make logical sense yet.
Right. And he says that act of stopping, it strengthens your soul, makes you more able to handle the bad stuff in life without being crushed by it.
Building that moral resilience.
Exactly. Then he talks about that classic story, Paradise in the Fall. Not literally, but as a metaphor. It's about being, the emergence of self-consciousness, and how that led to sacrifice as necessary for a better future.
It's a story that gets to the heart of what it means to be human, right?
It does. And this uniquely human ability to delay gratification, to sacrifice now for a bigger reward later, he says, that's a game changer. That's what allowed civilization to develop, to create a stable future.
Giving up something good now for something even better later.
Right. And sharing, he reframes that too. It's not about losing something for nothing, like kids think. It's the start of trade, of reciprocal exchange, which is the basis of friendship, of social bonds.
Understanding that we all benefit when we cooperate.
Yes. And he brings up Socrates, accepting his death. That's powerful. Facing death without fear, even seeing it as a potential good, letting him put his affairs in order peacefully.
Finding peace in the face of the ultimate loss.
It's incredible. And then he tackles the problem of evil, acknowledging that suffering, it's not just from tragedy, it's from cruelty, people hurting each other. Cain and Abel, that's a prime example, right? Resentment, envy leading to violence. It's a story as old as time.
A warning about how destructive those emotions can be.
For sure. And then the crucifixion of Christ, he presents that as the ultimate confrontation with evil. It's about overcoming those temptations that Cain gave into.
A symbol of conquering the darkness inside us. Powerful stuff.
It is. And then he talks about how Christianity elevated the individual soul. That was revolutionary. Everyone's equal before God, before the law. That challenged those rigid hierarchies of the ancient world.
A huge shift in how we value human life.
Huge. And then he brings in Dostoevsky, that parable of the Grand Inquisitor. It's a critique of how, he says, Christianity can sometimes offer these merciful escapes of faith in the afterlife. And that, in a way, lets people off the hook for striving to be good in this life.
It's like, does faith provide comfort or does it let us avoid responsibility? Big question.
It is. And then he points out how hard it is to truly change yourself. We can't just command ourselves to be different. Our nature, it pushes back.
We have to work with what we are, not just try to force ourselves into a new mold.
Exactly. And thinking itself, he describes it like it's almost a Darwinian process in our minds. Borrowing from Karl Popper, we test out ideas in our imagination, discard the bad ones, all without, like, real-world consequences.
It's like running simulations in our heads.
Right. And the big takeaway is positive change often means sacrificing beliefs we're attached to. If your life's telling you something's wrong, you got to be willing to let go of the old ways.
Even if it's scary, even if it's comfortable, sometimes you got to let go.
Absolutely. And that takes us to Rule 8. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. He tells this story, really poignant, about a mentally ill guy at the Douglas Hospital. It shows how complex communication is, but also how important honesty is. Even if it's hard, even if it's not what someone wants to hear, that honesty builds trust, connection.
Being truthful, it can be the foundation of a relationship, even when it's tough.
It can. And then he brings up life lies from Alfred Adler. It's about trying to manipulate reality based on this idea that, one, we already know everything we need to know, and two, reality's just too hard to handle. It's like the pride of Satan in Paradise Lost.
Building these walls of delusion to avoid the hard truths.
Right. And he gives the example of this guy who's pushed into engineering school, even though he doesn't want it. It leads to inner conflict, failure, living someone else's life, not your own.
Not following your own compass.
Exactly. And why do things fall apart? He says it's because of all those avoided truths, all those things we don't fix. Lies, they connect, they spread, like one drop of sewage in a whole glass of champagne.
One crack in the foundation and the whole thing can crumble.
That's it. Then he talks about psychotherapy. Says it's about listening, not giving advice. Advice is often a way to shut someone down or show off how smart you are. True listening, that's about trying to understand.
Hearing someone, not just waiting for your turn to talk or tell them what to do.
Exactly. He uses this really charged example, the question, was I raped? It shows how truth can be subjective, especially with personal experience. There might not be a single truth, but some accounts are definitely better than others.
Sometimes with trauma, there are no easy answers.
No. And thinking, real thinking, it's hard. It's like an argument in your own head, different perspectives battling it out. Not just self-criticism, not rationalizations, not propaganda.
A true internal debate, not just reinforcing what you already believe.
Right. And saying those thoughts out loud, even the bad ones, the shameful ones, in a safe space, that can be transformative. He uses the example, I hate my wife. That can be the starting point for real self-discovery.
Like actually saying it, it's different than just thinking it.
It is. And if you're not truly listening to people, he says, you're going to be bored. But when you really listen, conversations become fascinating.
I love that. He also points out how some conversations are more like dominance games.
Oh, yeah. It's not about exchange. It's about one-upmanship. Who's got the best point? Who's got the most knowledge? It's all about status.
So much of what we do, it's tied to that.
Yeah, sadly. Yeah. Then, this question, why does tech get obsolete so fast? He's linking that to how we perceive the world, how complex it really is under the surface. Like, take a laptop, seems simple, but it's a web of interconnected systems.
We don't see all that complexity, just the surface.
Right. We only see what's enough for our plans, our actions, and we mistake that limited view for reality itself. But when things break down, what do we see? Chaos, that tohu vabohu, the abyss that order emerges from.
Things fall apart, and suddenly we get a glimpse behind.
Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to me and helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.